Guys, we are back with the Ordopia and Coach Track podcast. This week, we are very lucky to have the amazing Paul Elias tell us a little bit about himself, to tell us all about his course. Paul, great to meet you. Great to have you on. We'd love to know a little bit about you and then a little bit about your course.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here. So, I guess where do I start? I run my own coaching and consultancy business called Exemplar Pro. And I guess my story is that at the tender age of 17, I joined the Royal Air Force and left home in South Wales. A little bit wet behind the ears and a little bit shy and quite introverted. And I was thrust into this environment of the military. It was a steep learning curve. And I was what we call a physical training instructor for 22 years. But 15 years of that time, I spent as a performance coach, which is fantastic. So what did that involve? It involved me taking people away to various parts of the world, various expeditions. We go to hot places, cold places, quite risky environments as well. And we would challenge them physically, mentally, see how they performed when they were cold, wet, tired, hungry, see what kind of behavior showed up in the team, who was the sort of natural leaders and so on in that fairly high pressure environment. All this was to basically benefit them and get them ready for when they were on more real, tougher assignments around the world, including various operations. So in that time, that 15 years, I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about what it takes to be resilient in the moment, and a lot about people as well. So it was a great career.
Paul, that's an amazing story. Thanks so much for sharing. So, look, I'm a firm believer that you can't lead others down a path if you haven't walked it yourself. And I know you've obviously had some real unique experiences, which has led you into this course. So, look, what was the real inspiration behind the course? What was the light bulb moment that made you go, right, I've got something here, something that can be really helpful? And tell us a little bit more about that and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, sure. So the course is it's called Rooted and Resilient. And the metaphor is that we're all like a tree. Okay. So in storms, if the tree is not supported, strong, hasn't got good roots, good soil, a strong trunk, the tree's going to fall down. So I guess throughout my career, the time I spent in the Royal Air Force taught me a lot about resilience, a lot about how you manage life in the storms. And then when I left in 2012, I'd done a lot of work for 6 years with wounded, injured and sick military personnel, at the time coming back from operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. So again, I learned a lot about mindset, what's needed to overcome serious injuries, lots of trauma-related issues, as you can imagine from the operations there. So really, Rooted and Resilient is based on many, many years of life experiences myself, stories that and experiences I've been through, and the people that I've worked with is about how do you manage the storm? Because storms will always come, and the more rooted and the more resilient you are, you're then in a better place to manage those storms. So there's lots of elements around that. There's things about how strong your roots, what are the roots of the course. So things like, for me, it's I need family around me. I need a balance of work and life. I need to exercise each day. It's all them kind of things. What are sort of the foundational pillars that you need to maintain your wellness?
Great. Yeah, that's a great answer. And there's definitely something there, real power, isn't there, in being rounded, if that makes sense. But I find like the real power of coaching is having someone look at you from the outside in. Sometimes it's hard to find that power introspectively. When I was looking at your course, Paul, and I was looking at your background, the thing that really shone through was PTG, post-traumatic growth. Coming back to that, you can't lead others down a path if you haven't walked it yourself. Such a powerful story, such powerful stuff. But who's your ideal client? Let's say you're on LinkedIn. Let's say you're on X or Instagram. Who do you think this resonates to most?
Good question, because a simple question could be to everybody. But I guess I guess what I've learned throughout my life, guys, is that we're not always ready for the storm. We seem to have some good things in place and some good habits and behaviors. But during the storm, we don't always follow the advice and we don't always do the things that are going to keep us well. For instance, through a difficult period, I know what I need now, which is to exercise, to eat well, to sleep well, to sometimes have my own space. And it's really about understanding what you need. So this course is designed for anybody that will face a storm in their life, because it will happen. And it's really having that awareness and that template that we need to say, do you know what? When it comes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And that's going to keep me in the best possible place it can, because there's going to be strong winds, there's going to be storms, going to be really, really trying to push our tree down. So it can be for anybody. Naturally, it would be for leaders, but guess what? We're all leaders in our own right. And it's for anybody across there that's going to face challenges in their life.
Wow, powerful stuff. Yeah, and I really agree with that. Paul, we want to give your course the best possible opportunity for it to succeed. And you've got Dan Williams in the room here to help you. I know you've got a burning question for him. I know we were speaking a little bit more off about air, and we've been looking at this for a few weeks. But what was your biggest conundrum, your biggest question for Dan to really help your course succeed?
This is quite a big question, I guess, guys, because, I've had a lot of life experiences. I've had lots of successes in my life. And I've had lots of moments where I've learned from it. And you mentioned earlier, Greg, around post-traumatic growth. And there's lots of things I've done in my life which I'm not proud of, and I've failed at as well. So really, throughout that time, I've gained a lot of wisdom and I've gained a lot of learning through that time as well. My challenge, I guess, Dan, is how do I try and interest in what I can do? How do I try and create a place where people want to buy what I do as well? Because naturally, I'm a people person, but I'm not a pushy person because, I think I mentioned earlier that when I left the RAF in 2012, I took a quick job as a sales, selling broadband and telephone sales. I lasted 3 days, hated it because I hated that feeling of going into a business, into a room and knowing that I was there to try and sell something. And it really didn't sit comfortably with me. And I wasn't natural at doing that. It's not who I am. So I guess the question is, how do I try and get people to buy what I'm selling, okay, or what I'm offering without feeling pushy, without feeling uncomfortable myself?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is warming them up before you go in for the sale. So the first thing that stands out to me is obviously your military experience. And obviously everyone respects that as well. So I would lean into that as your thing. Really get personal with your story as well. Because it's especially important as a life coach because your clients or your audience aren't going to trust you until you humanize yourself for them. And obviously trust is what makes it easy to turn views into clients. And obviously turn all right clients into great ones who really open up, which obviously makes it easier for you to help them. I know on your website you've already got and also a couple of TikToks about authenticity.
Yeah.
So I think you've really got to take your own advice there and open up. I wrote down a couple of ideas. You could say something like 5 leadership lessons from the army that work in the office, or the hidden cost of weak leadership under pressure. Something like that. There's so many stories that you could go into, I'm sure, and kind of help people.
Yeah.
And they're not going to be offended that you're trying to sell them because obviously you've got a lot to offer. You're not a scammer or anything like that, like most of the people are that you get DMs from.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think definitely lean into that unique edge and send those DMs.
Dan, that's a great answer. Yeah, Paul, what made me really think about your question when I saw you is this idea of lead nurturing. It's really interesting that I'm looking at you two in front of me, and I've got one who's type A, one who's type B. Type A's is Dan, the Wolf of Wall Street guys, the salesman, the clean cut, say it how it is. And Paul, you're a little bit like me, which is type B, which is a coach. You're here to help people. The problem is, Dan, is you can be a good coach, but you can be a terrible marketer. You can be a great marketer, but you can be a terrible coach. Some way you've got to try and fit straight down the middle, which is difficult. And that means, leaning into a lion or being someone at times you maybe don't want to be. But when you need it to work, when you've got established a need, when it has to work, you've got to go straight up the middle. That's why I was talking to you possibly about the idea of building a community, whereas you nurture them, where you get them in for free, you create a newsletter, you create a community, you get to know them more. And then you'll realize that people actually want to buy. Before they buy, they want to see you 6 to 8 times, which is great. And that's why a community or newsletter is so good for that. A podcast, all stuff that we've talked to you about, and all stuff that we know that you've taken on, this advice you've taken on. So tell us a little bit more about that, what your plans are, because it's a great method to give your course exposure. It's a great method for people to get to know you more, and then we can maybe break that down. Dan, how's that sound?
Yeah, I guess for me, it's throughout my time in the military, okay, and the basis of my company is around, like you said, Dan, authenticity. It's about being authentic and really being comfortable with who you are. Now, again, life has taught me, but for many years when I was in the Royal Air Force, and I was working with all 3 services, the Army and the Navy, in many different ways. But I wasn't particularly authentic in that role because I felt I had to fit in and be a certain type. And that was generally, I was a natural introvert pretending to be an extrovert in that role. I had to be at the front of the crowd, providing energy, buzz, just life and soul of the party. And it wasn't naturally me. So it was hard and it drained my energy. So it took me a little bit later in life and a few experiences to understand just be who you are. Okay. And that's why I based the whole company on authentic leadership and authenticity. So the community really is about that, about sharing stories, sharing experiences, me showing a level of vulnerability as well to say, look, I've learned some lessons along the way. And these are my top tips along this, but really building that community where we can go there and be ourselves. Because if we want to be rooted and we want to be resilient, guess what? We have to be a little bit vulnerable and really understand who we are and work with who we are. So that's the whole basis of it. And I want to create a really safe space, obviously, like we all do in communities, but a really psychologically safe space. And for us to really share some experiences and some stories and for it to be really inclusive, not just me telling everybody this is how you lead your life, because guess what? That's not what I'm about. And I've learned some lessons along the way as well. So yeah.
So I've got a question for you then, Dan. This is the person that he wants to look for. This is the sort of client, someone who would relate to Paul. How would you go about doing that? X, LinkedIn, Instagram? Where's the best place to find these people? What sort of caption would you write? What sort of hook? How would you try and grab their attention?
Yeah, that's a big one. I think, yeah, definitely the platform is important. You should start with posting everything on everything platforms because usually you don't really know exactly who's going to be where. So it's definitely good to trial and error for a bit. And obviously you're making the content anyway, so it's easy to just copy and paste a tweet onto LinkedIn or anything like that. With the hooks and stuff, it's all about calling out the problem. So Paul's doing that already really well, kind of talking about how fake people are, how authenticity is important. But it's at the moment, Paul, your content's very conceptual. You're kind of asking the audience a lot of questions rather than giving them the answers. So I think the best structure for a LinkedIn or a TikTok post would be highlighting the problem and then solving it so your audience thinks you're great. And then saying, by the way, I have a really good course as well, so access it using this link. That's kind of the funnel. That's what we're going for. Relatability, leaning into those military stories to highlight the problem. That's definitely going to help you resonate more. And then kind of stop being so conceptual and get more actionable, which is obviously going to resonate with your audience much more. If you're going to help them already up front for free, by the time you send that DM, they're going to love you already and they're going to want to pay you. And they're really going to trust you, which is the main thing with content. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yes, a good answer, Dan. There was one thing that we spoke about off air, and it's like, what are you comfortable to talk about? What are you not comfortable to talk about? The real reason for that is the art of storytelling, isn't it, Dan? And how important that is. I've got a great story for you, Paul, about Dan. Dan signed his first client off 30 followers and one or two posts or whatever it was. And actually, that means that you don't have to chase going viral. Actually, you've got to chase being authentic, and it's only got to be read by a few people, but it's got to have that light bulb moment with. But that brings me on to you a lot in this story you've got in the sort of guy you are. That actually, you don't need to go viral. You don't need that. You've got to hammer home to a few. All right, you've got to resonate with a few. There was a story that you were prepared to tell us. What I thought maybe we could do is, if you're happy to tell us, Paul, this story, Dan could help you reframe it, discuss how it'd be put out the right way to get the right sort of person to have the eyes on it. How does that sound, Paul? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, why not? Yeah. Do you want me to share
Yeah,
some?
there was one in particular which really hit home. And the reason why it hit home is this. It made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. So you got to imagine when people see that, watch it, it stops the scroll. So if it can stop the scroll and then Dan has the words to get it through to a funnel, that's where the magic happens, isn't it, Dan? So talk to us a little bit more about this, Paul, and then Dan can help you frame that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to what you said earlier, Greg, around post-traumatic growth. And in 2002, unfortunately, I was involved in a fatality in my role in the RAF. Okay, I wasn't directly involved, but I was part of the group. I was there on the day, and there's a few mistakes made on the day. And as an organisation, as a team, we learned a lot of things that day. I guess through a great deal of therapy and a great deal of pain as well over the years, and I'm talking 20 years of carrying this guilt and this pain. I've learned a lot of things. And really, on the day itself, if I focus on the day, it was very much an ego-driven culture that I worked in. I was fitting into something that I felt I needed to fit into a group, into a certain type of behavior, because, as much as the military is great, sometimes it does breed that kind of ego state, which wasn't me. And I fell into that trap of behaving like that. And we made some decisions on the day that we shouldn't have done. And throughout that, I carried guilt for many, many years. And with a little bit of therapy now, I understand that actually it wasn't particularly all about the mistakes made on the day. It was about culture, about who you were, and how we need to be authentic in how we do stuff and be true to yourself. And what I didn't do in that time, in that couple of years I was working at that place, was really stand up for who I was. And if I can help people to really be authentic and true to themselves without feeling the pressure of behaving in a certain way, that would give me a hell of a lot of satisfaction. It really
Wow,
would.
Paul, that is absolutely amazing. Dan, to help you and give you a little bit of reference for that, what Paul's talking about is bond trauma. So the idea of we are all a product of our environment, we all are affected by stuff that's happened to us throughout our lives, okay? Product of our environment, bond trauma. That also leads to something called fearful avoidant attachment style, okay? Personality. That means that it's not something that's going to go viral. It's not something that, if it were that sort of story going to be read to 100 people, you'd expect the majority of them to go, wow, that's too heavy for me to take on. But it will resonate with a very large proportion of that as well. And how would you go about that? How would you market it? How would you put it out there? What would you say?
Yeah, so I think it's a really useful story. And obviously, as a life coach, it's really going to help people trust you. So the main thing is getting the hook, which is the first line or the first couple of seconds of a video, getting that right. So with this one, I'd go something like, we made a mistake that cost me 20 years of guilt, something like that. That's going to entice the people that you want to entice. That's going to really make you stand out among, like the 19-year-old life coaches. They weren't even born. So you're really already a step ahead with the first line. Then it's just about kind of getting that story across, how you want to get it across. I'm not going to tell you how to write. That's really up to you and how you want to sound to your audience. I think, it's like that story's great. It's a story. That's what matters. As long as the hook's good, and then you've got the CTA, which is the call to action. So that's kind of going to be at the bottom or in the comments of a post. That's going to be like your link to your community, something like that. So this is going to help you. If you found this helpful, this is going to help you kind of do what I did and get over this guilt, which obviously took a long time, and you can speed it up using the lessons that I've learned, something like that, kind of linking it to the post. And that's all you really need to do. Tell those stories and get the hook right is really important.
Well, just before I hand you over, Paul, Dan, Paul's discussed about, he's thinking about making a podcast, inviting a guest on, talking about stories, sharing these life experiences, PTG, post-traumatic growth. How would you go about advertising, marketing that podcast? Because obviously the reels are crucial, aren't they? 200% more effective than anything you can write. So we know that video is much more effective. How would you go about it? What would you do?
Yeah, using clips is really important. I think I would share the clips, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, X, they all do well because obviously platforms are kind of leaning more towards videos now because people's dopamine is so done in because of all the scrolling that they're doing. So I think, post those videos, see what resonates the most, and then kind of talk about that more and post more videos about that thing. And then obviously in the post, you could say, by the way, this is from my podcast. You can listen to the whole thing here. Something like that. That's going to lead them up in the funnel. That's going to make them trust you more. They're going to be more likely to send you a DM or be responsive to a DM from you because they've seen you more times. And it's kind of moving them up that funnel that you want to really do.
Yeah, that's an amazing answer, Dan. This idea of stopping the scroll. And Paul, I know authenticity was massive, It makes me think that you're not the sort of guy to go on CapCut, type in a script, read off it. It might feel a little fake for you. So I feel like the idea of actually taking the podcast, speaking from the heart, speaking normally, maybe unscripted, will be the best way. That is definitely authenticity at its finest as well, isn't it? So I think that's a super idea. From that, you can nurture them into the community. You can get to know these guys. Remember, they want to see you 6 to 8 times before they buy. So there is no hard sell. There is no pushiness. There is no leaning into a type A. You're actually here to help and you want to help them. And then you realise that actually people don't look at prices. There's no need to even advertise them. Dan will tell you, and I tell other coaches, you won't find my prices anywhere. They don't need to be because people want to buy you, not so much your course. And that is great for you, isn't it, Paul? It means you don't have to be that guy who's selling Wi-Fi in broadband. You can be the guy who wants to help others, nurture them into a place, which is from the heart, and then let the magic happen, which is great. So I've got another question for you, Paul. So you've got this guy, this character that we've created, and they've had a real traumatic experience in their life. It's created bond trauma. They've had this fearful avoidant attachment style, which has been created after it. It's affected them. Like that event that affected you, we're all a product of our environment. Talk me through how the course would help them. How would it improve them? Because that is one of the secrets as well, isn't it, Dan? Is giving them value. People want to know that what they're getting is going to really help them. So talk me through maybe the process of getting from A to B. How would it look like at the end, and how would the course help?
Can I tell a story? A very short story
Absolutely.
then. But this is somebody told me a story about 6 or 7 years ago, and it stuck with me, man, and it still sticks with me every day now. It's a story about Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva one day was walking along the bank of the river Euphrates, and he's so absorbed in his manuscripts. And he was reading his manuscripts, and he was walking back to his village, and he took a wrong turn. He should have turned left, and he turned right. And what happened then? He stumbled across this Roman fortress. And as he's walking along the Roman fortress, a big booming voice from above in the tower shouted out, "Stop! Who are you? Why are you here?" So Rabbi Akiva was startled, didn't quite know what to say. And again, the Roman guard shouted, "Who are you and why are you here?" So Rabbi Akiva, being the wise rabbi he was, paused for a moment and responded by saying, "How much you get paid a day to ask those questions?" The Roman guard was taken aback, didn't quite know what to say. So he said, "Well, 10 denarii a day, not a lot of money." So Rabbi Akiva, being the wise one he was, said, "Okay, I'll pay you double that if you come outside my house every morning, and when I wake up, you ask me those 2 questions. Who are you and why are you here?" So that's the basis of what I want to do, is get people to understand who you are and ask yourselves those questions. Who are you really and why are you here? And that's what I want to do, is get people to really not go to the shallows of it, of I'm Paul, I'm 52, I live in North Wales, really deeper levels to who you really are. And that's what my journey has taught me, is to really, and it's taken me time to be comfortable with who I really am, and explore that and get people out there to really explore those deeper questions. So yeah.
Powerful stuff, Paul. Love that. And I love the story as well. Something powerful in idioms and in stories as well, you know. Dan, the master. You've got that idiom, you've got that Chinese proverb sort of story there. What would you do with it? How would you go about it? So it's the idea of that bond trauma, post-traumatic growth, getting them from A to B. Do you think X is a great platform for this? Because I feel like that's maybe a better place to get to know people. I feel on LinkedIn, Paul would only be mingling, if you like, with other people, okay? Like networking, other coaches, if that makes sense, people from his RAF background. But is X and Instagram a better place to find these people, to tell those sort of?
Yeah, X is an interesting one because it's so broad. You're going to attract so many different types of people. The connections there definitely feel less surface level than LinkedIn, for me anyway. Because obviously you're kind of getting more personality out of them, and you're getting less of the polished, inauthentic stuff, which is what Paul kind of wants to do. But I think with Paul, he's obviously getting his clients already from LinkedIn. If it's working, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's what they say. So definitely double down on that. What I would do is, the stories are great. Keep the stories. Get the hook sorted. So you could say something like, "This rabbi saved his life with a interesting question or a good question," and people are obviously going to be intrigued by that, especially if they've seen you already, knowing that you're obviously got a lot of good insights and you know what you're talking about. So that's perfect. I think with X, it's very hit or miss. It's very trial or error. It's worth trying. You might as well, if you've written the thing already on LinkedIn, or you've made the video already, just post it, see what happens. And I think, yeah, even if you make like a couple of connections on X, they're probably going to be more likely to convert than LinkedIn, because obviously you're kind of getting a less surface level person there. So yeah, it's worth trying, but definitely keep the LinkedIn. And yeah,
That's a great
Can
answer.
I ask
Yes,
you
Paul.
guys a question? Just a quick one. So run this idea behind you. Okay. So like, as you know, authenticity is everything. The videos I've done previously, some of them have taken 20 takes. I've got this idea now that I want to do a 1-take video series where the message that I say, do you know what, even if it's not perfect, it's not polished, I'm just going to post it as a 1-take series. I don't know what you think.
That's a really good question. I can help you with this a lot because, Dan, this is a question we get asked a lot at the Coach Trap, isn't it? For me, I do it once. I can make 6 videos in 30 minutes. I look at it once and then I send it. I realise if I look at it 2 or 3 times, I wait, I ponder, I second guess myself, and guess what? I don't put it out. I have that moment of self-doubt, right? And I talked to you about this as well before we come on. In this business, putting yourself out as a coach, there is always going to be a certain amount. I was going to say hate. Hate's probably the wrong word. Cringe factor. Okay. and I openly said to you, Dan, then I'm not sure if this is a great thing to say on a podcast, but anyone who comments negatively or doesn't like what I do, I use it. It turns into a newsletter. I turn it into another post or whatever, okay? Because we're all here in growth or whatever aspects it is. So that is my advice for you. Is also one thing that we teach at the Coach Trap is to create a formula for yourself. So I spend 1 hour a day, and I have 20 minutes, 20-minute sections of DMs, cold outreach, and social media. If I go over the 20 minutes, I stop it there, I carry it on the next day. That is the difference between lasting a month and 2 years, isn't it, Dan? Me and Dan see so many people come and go. We had a guy that we spoke to the other day that told us he spent 4 to 5 hours a day creating content. And I said, you aren't going to last a week doing that. So it's creating a structure which is good for you. I'd say do it once, put it out there, never look at it again. That does lead into you being authentic, and also it'll help you prevent that cringe factor. But also, you've got to be prepared for trial and error. That's why the reels are so good. And this is something that we talk to others about, isn't it, Dan? Is like this podcast, we'll be able to create 40 reels. Some of them will do better than others. And you'll be really surprised, actually, what your face fits, what your accent fits to. It might not be what you think it will be. Actually, when we look at the data from the reels that me and Dan do, we don't tend to do straight on videos anymore. Actually, the ones that get 6, 7, 8, 10,000 views aren't the ones that you think. But that makes you think that's what people are looking for. It's not what you think. And there's another thing to that, isn't there, Dan, is honing in on what people are looking for. Sometimes it's not what you think. Do you have any advice for that, Dan, of like, you know, if he's making a video, if he's making a content, syncing it, making sure that it's on trend or that it's something that people are actually looking for?
Yeah, one-take videos are a really good idea because obviously they're going to make you sound more authentic. I think just getting those ideas, like you could tweet ideas that you have and then go back, look at them, and then talk about them more on a video. I think you've got to not be too scared of pausing and like thinking about what you're going to say as you're saying it, because that's going to, it's not going to annoy your audience or the ones that you want to attract anyway. It's going to be a more authentic version of you, a you that's going to be more like the person that's going to help them as a coach. So definitely keep those one-take videos. Obviously, not everyone's really good at it. Greg's really good at it. He can talk for ages without any ums or ahs or anything like that. I'm not as good. I'm a writer, but it's still effective for everyone, and it's getting your personality across, and it's really leaning into that, your own advice, which is being authentic. So yeah.
Good answer. Paul, I've got one last question for you before we go. I feel this would be really valuable in terms of you as a coach in your course. I did a podcast with someone before Christmas. It was all about sobriety. I never thought I was going to go sober. I've not had a drink for 120 odd days. I feel so much more productive. I feel better. But it was inspiration off one guy on a podcast who said to me, if you don't have a drink for 90 days, it will change your life. And it has. I feel like that's really relevant for someone like you. Might not be drinking, but is there like a real take home from the experiences that you've had, a real life hack that the listeners could take home?
Well, good question. I guess it's all around discomfort, I guess. And I wrote an article about this last month around sitting with discomfort is a great thing to do. So for me, for many years, I sat with comfort, fitting in to the crowd. And if not until actually I sat with discomfort and doing the real hard work that I've seen myself really progress and I'm comfortable with who I am. So really just being able to sit with discomfort, practice it daily, whatever that is. That could be going in an ice bath or speaking up in a presentation, whatever, but really push yourself and stretch yourself to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Wow. Being uncomfortable, being comfortable with the uncomfortable is real powerful stuff. Paul, I love that. Thank you so much for joining us, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan. Paul, where's the best place to find you? And then let's start to wrap it up.
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I've got my own page, Exemplar Pro, on LinkedIn. I've got my own personal profile. You'll find me on Instagram. You'll find me on TikTok, but that's a whole learning experience on TikTok. And also I'm on X as well. But and I think part of going away from here is really trying to do more on X and trying to sort of explore that. So I'm on all the normal platforms.
Great stuff. Paul, thank you so much for joining us. Guys, remember, don't fall into the coach trap. Until next time, take care. Speak soon.